I'm sitting here now, 6 months later, making more money than I ever thought possible. But that moment still replays in my head like a broken record. The moment when Jessica Walsh, all 36 years of MBA arrogance squeezed into a ridiculously expensive designer suit, decided my navy tie wasn't progressive enough for her vision of modern workplace excellence. Let me back up. I'm Thomas Pearson, 49 years old. I'd been working federal security clearance contracts for 15 years, after spending 12 years in the Air Force doing communication security. I got out as a tech sergeant. I lost my wife, Sarah, to cancer 3 years ago, and I ended up at Nexus Defense because they needed someone who actually understood government contracts. Not the theory from business school, but the brutal, tedious, necessary reality of dealing with federal bureaucracy. There's a big difference between reading about a security clearance in a management book and actually holding one. Jessica Walsh read about it. I held a secret clearance with DOE Oversight Authority. That meant the Department of Energy personally authorized me to verify compliance on classified contracts. That distinction was about to cost Nexus everything. The day it went sideways started normal enough. I was reviewing compliance documents for our biggest contract, the $100 million Department of Energy Partnership for Grid Security Infrastructure. 3 years in development, covering 6 states, with enough federal oversight to choke a horse. I was the named security agent, which in government speak means I was personally responsible for verifying that everyone touching classified materials had proper clearance. You can't just reassign that responsibility like a desk job. When the DOE designates you as the security agent on a contract, that designation is tied to your personal clearance file, your background investigation, your entire career history. It's federal law, not company policy. But Jessica didn't know that. Jessica didn't know much about anything related to our actual business. Harvard MBA, for weeks at Nexus, already making enemies faster than she could learn the coffee machine. She'd been brought in to modernize operations and streamline efficiency protocols. Translation, make everyone miserable while justifying her ridiculous salary. That Tuesday morning, I was wearing the same navy tie I'd worn to probably 200 client meetings. Clean, professional. Same black Oxford shoes I'd been wearing for years. I'd worn this exact outfit to DOE facilities, Pentagon briefings, you name it. Never once had a complaint. But Jessica had been reading leadership books about establishing authority and setting new standards, a dangerous combination for someone with zero understanding of what we actually did. The video call was supposed to be a routine check-in about next week's DOE audit. Instead, I got a lecture about professional appearance from someone who'd probably never set foot in a federal facility. Thomas, she said, skipping any pleasantries, we need to address your appearance during yesterday's client presentation. I blinked. Yesterday had gone perfectly. Client was happy. Inspection passed. Paperwork clean. What about it? She sighed, like I was being deliberately thick. The tie, Thomas. It's not aligned with our updated professional standards, and those shoes clearly don't meet the requirements we outlined in the new Workplace Excellence Protocol. The Workplace Excellence Protocol was something she'd created the week before, a dress code overhaul buried in a 52-page email about operational improvements, the kind of document designed to let you claim you communicated something without actually communicating it. Jessica, I said, keeping my voice level, I've been wearing this same setup for 6 years. It's approved by legal, it's in the employee handbook, and, more importantly, it meets DOE security requirements for contractor personnel. That should have ended it. DOE requirements always trump company policy. But Jessica was just getting warmed up. She leaned back in her chair like she was about to deliver profound wisdom. Thomas, we're elevating standards across all departments. Professional image directly impacts client confidence. Our stakeholders need to see that we're serious about excellence at every level. This from someone who'd shown up to her first board meeting wearing a blazer with shoulder pads that went out of style in the 90s. And frankly, she continued, her voice hardening, this resistance to evolving standards is exactly the kind of outdated thinking we're trying to move past. We need team members who can adapt to modern expectations without pushback. Effective immediately, you're dismissed. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't even ask if she was serious. I just stared at her pixelated face for about 10 seconds, my own expression completely blank, then reached over and closed my laptop. The click was final, definitive. The silence in my home office was complete, the kind of quiet that usually means something important just broke. And something had broken. Jessica just didn't know it yet. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my closed laptop. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't shocked. It was more like watching a slow-motion car wreck where you can see exactly how it's going to end, but the other driver is too busy texting to notice the guardrail she's about to hit. Jessica had just made the kind of mistake that separates people who think they understand federal contracting from people who actually do. In the corporate world, you fire someone and you hire a replacement next week. Easy. In federal clearance work, you just severed the only thread holding your contract together. My secret clearance wasn't company property. It belonged to me, Thomas Pearson. My social security number was on file with the Office of Personnel Management. When the DOE designated me as the named security agent on contract DO GS 47B250M, they weren't picking a random employee. They were certifying that I personally had been investigated, cleared, and authorized to handle classified grid security data. You can't transfer that designation like moving office supplies. Federal Acquisition Regulation 9.405 is crystal clear. When the security agent separates from employment, the clearance designation becomes inactive pending formal transfer procedures. And formal transfer procedures, they take anywhere from 90 to 180 days, assuming you can even find someone with equivalent clearance and experience waiting on the bench. Jessica didn't know any of this. She probably thought clearance was something you picked up from HR on your first day, alongside your security badge. I stood up and walked to the kitchen and made coffee. The good stuff, the kind I save for weekends, not the office swill. Outside my window, the neighborhood was doing its Tuesday thing. School buses dropping off kids. Neighbors walking dogs. Normal people living normal lives. My life was anything but normal, but I was suddenly free. And my new freedom had a very specific $100 million price tag attached to it, a tag Nexus was about to receive. I thought about the arrogance I'd just witnessed. The sheer, breathtaking disrespect. She'd weaponized a dress code, a navy tie and clean shoes, to try and assert dominance over someone whose knowledge and experience were literally the foundation of her entire division's biggest revenue stream. It wasn't just my tie she dismissed, it was 27 years of military and federal service. She'd called my thinking outdated. I was about to show her exactly how relevant outdated federal regulations could be. I walked back to my office. The rage, when it finally arrived, was cold, focused, and utterly silent. It wasn't the kind of rage that makes you yell, it was the kind that makes you calculate. I opened my laptop, ready to assess the damage, not to my career, which I knew was fine, but to the multimillion-dollar debt they owed to the federal government. Jessica thought she was managing personnel. She was about to learn she was managing a federal compliance nightmare. I had an asset, my clearance, my knowledge, that was both essential to Nexus and entirely uncontrollable by them. I pulled up the secure folder where I kept my clearance documents. Everything was there, my SF-86 security application, the background investigation summary, my DOE oversight authorization, and my JPAS profile showing my active secret clearance through March 2026. This wasn't company property. This was my life. The DOE contract itself was right there, too. 4 to 7 pages of dense federal bureaucracy, but the important part was on page 12, section 4.3.2. I read the lines slowly, letting the meaning sink in, not for myself, I already knew it, but for the mental image of the frantic Nexus legal team who were about to discover it. Named Security Agent, Thomas D. Pearson, Nexus Defense Solutions. Clearance level, secret. DOE authorization, active. And buried in that tiny, yet devastating, section 4.3.2. In the event of security agent separation from contractor employment, all project activities must cease pending formal designation transfer as outlined in FAR 9.405b3. Translation, no me, no contract. The entire grid security infrastructure project across 6 states, $100 million in federal funding, instantly freezes. The DOE audit scheduled for next week. Dead on arrival. This wasn't a minor administrative error. It was a full-blown federal compliance crisis. The money, of course, was secondary, but not irrelevant. My son, Austin, was at Virginia Tech, a sophomore studying electrical engineering. Smart kid. Probably going to end up designing the same power grid systems I spent my days protecting. Between tuition, books, and living expenses, I was looking at about $30,000 a year. That steady paycheck was crucial. Add in the mortgage, the utilities, and the crushing reality of the medical bills left over from Sarah's cancer treatment. Sarah had fought for 18 months, and I'd spent every penny I could on treatments, specialists, and experimental therapies. Insurance covered most of it, but most still left us with about $40,000 in debt. I'd been chipping away at it, but losing my job was more than inconvenient. It was a financial threat. But I wasn't panicking, because I knew my value. I didn't delete anything or copy company files. Everything I was looking at belonged to me, regardless of where I worked. I just took a moment to appreciate the beautiful simplicity of federal regulation. Jessica thought she was managing personnel. She was about to learn she was managing a federal compliance nightmare. I had an asset, my clearance, my knowledge, that was both essential to Nexus and entirely uncontrollable by them. I didn't update my resume immediately. Sometimes the best move is sitting perfectly still and letting the other people make all the noise. I spent the rest of Tuesday organizing my personal files. I needed to be ready, not to fight them, but to launch myself into the next stage of my career. I felt a surge of energy I hadn't felt since before Sarah got sick. This wasn't just about a job, it was about professional pride and the cold, hard satisfaction of watching arrogance devour itself Wednesday morning. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the phone started ringing. The first call was an unknown number, a 703 area code, Northern Virginia, the heart of the defense contractor belt. Probably Nexus. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Different number, same area code. Then again. By the fourth call, I was curious enough to answer, but I let the fifth one go, too. I wanted them to sweat. The sixth call finally caught me. Thomas Pearson. My voice was calm, measured. Thomas. Thank God. This is Helen Rodriguez from Nexus Compliance. We need to talk. Helen. She'd been with the company for 11 years, longer than almost anyone except the founders. She was the kind of person who actually read contracts and remembered where the problems were buried. If Helen was calling me directly, someone, probably legal, in a cold sweat, had finally figured out what Jessica had done. What can I do for you, Helen? Thomas, we have a situation. The DOE audit is Monday, and legal just realized there might be an issue with the security agent designation. They are asking questions about your termination. I looked out my kitchen window. It was a nice day. Sunny, quiet. What kind of questions? They want to know if your clearance status affects the contract. I told them I'd reach out to you directly. The careful way she said it told me everything. Legal had finally read the actual contract, probably for the first time since it was signed. They'd found Section 4.3.2, done the quick math, and realized they were about to face a federal audit with no authorized security agent. Helen, I said, settling back into my kitchen chair. I'm not a Nexus employee anymore, remember? Professional appearance standards. The silence lasted about 10 seconds. Long enough for Helen Rodriguez to realize her 11-year career at Nexus was about to get very interesting. She knew I was citing the exact, ridiculous reason for my dismissal. It was the only thing I needed to say. Thomas, please. This is bigger than Jessica's mistake. We're talking about a $100 million contract. Her voice was now edged with genuine fear. The audit team arrives Monday morning, and if we can't provide security agent verification. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. We both knew what happened when DOE audits failed, contract suspension, funding freeze, and heads rolling all the way up to the executive suite. I thought about Jessica, her arrogant smirk, her dismissal of my years of expertise. I felt a small, hard smile spread across my face. She'd used the petty tyranny of a dress code to try and make me feel small. Now, she was facing the bureaucratic tsunami I had inadvertently created. I had them exactly where I wanted them. What exactly are you asking me to do, Helen? My voice was still calm, but I injected a slight formality, the kind of tone that signifies a professional negotiation is about to begin. I was no longer her colleague. I was the crisis consultant they hadn't hired, and were now desperate for. Could you just come in Monday and handle the verification? Just for the audit. We'll figure out the paperwork afterward. Figure out the paperwork. That meant trying to ram an emergency transfer through the federal system, which was impossible, or trying to trick the auditors, which was illegal. I looked out at my neighbor washing his car in the driveway, taking his time, doing it right. I don't work there anymore, Helen. Jessica made that pretty clear. Thomas, what would it take? And there it was. The question that meant they'd finally realized exactly how deep the hole was. It wasn't about coming in to help. It was about ransom.